Well, we will see. I mean, I actually have a serious question for you regarding that. And, he holds grudges and he's hypersensitive to the way that he's spoken about and portrayed in the media. And here you are with the responsibility of making a documentary about his life, not just his career. Have you heard any feedback during this run from his camp? Have you heard any criticisms from his people? What has been Michael Jordan's response to The Last Dance?
I have no idea. And I don't say that derisively. I don't.
That's a good thing.
We don't have that relationship. And if we did, then there'd be a problem with the making of the documentary. I didn't get into this thing. Listen, it's a thrill to interview Michael Jordan. Don't get me wrong. But I didn't get into this thing to be friends with Michael Jordan, nor should I have. It would be irresponsible of me to do that. So I think I did my job as well as I could do it. I think he respected the job that I had to come in and do, but it's not like we're on text. I do text with his son every once in a while. Marcus, we're friendly.
Shout Marcus.
Great guy. And it's and also Jeffrey and Jasmine, we interviewed them as well. And I have a good relationship with them. I think that their family is so incredible in so many ways. And I've said that about his mom and everybody else. But I don't have that relationship with them. And honestly, like he's not the audience for this thing.
Well, I think the fact that you haven't gotten any notes back from him is good news in this sense, but you did get some notes during the editing process, and you got some interesting notes about this particular episode in regards to the chronology of his returning to basketball and the double nickel game in MSG. What exactly did Michael Air Jeffrey Jordan tell you about the chronology of his return to the NBA?
This was right when we went into lockdown. So, I know that Michael saw bits and pieces of earlier episodes, but I think that he had a life to live and he was probably out golfing 36 holes a day and hanging out with his twin babies and just living retired life, doing what he's doing for the Jordan brand and for the Hornets, whatever. So I don't think that the doc was at the forefront of his mind. When the quarantine went down in mid-March, all of us were locked down, including the Michael Jordans of the world. So he had time, ample time, for better or worse, to watch these rough cuts just like the rest of the partners had done for the entire process. So all of us back in the edit room were like, we were at home actually at that point, but on the edit team, we're thinking like, what is this going to mean for what if he says, rip up these episodes? I don't want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, change it around, take this out, take this out. So we got notes back on episode 8. And it has like whose note it is. And it's, John Dodge, JD, Connor Shell, CS.
Shout, Libby
guys. And there's a note, there's an MJ note, which was like, okay. And when he came back from baseball, the first game was against Indiana in Indianapolis. And he was rusty. We cut from that just for time purposes. We cut right from that comeback game because we had to cover that game right to the double nickel, famous 55-point game in Madison Square Garden. His note, he said, there was a game in between those in Atlanta when I hit a buzzer beater. So go check that out because that's when I knew I could be the old MJ was that night in Atlanta. So it's one thing to get that note from any executive would be a great note. To get it from the guy who's saying this, I'm telling you, this is when I knew I could be that guy. It was a perfect note to get. He gave a similar note about the Oakley Cartwright trade earlier in the series. He said that when we're talking about the Jerry Krause beef, like that was a big brick in that wall that he traded Oakley away. So we should,
in his prime,
we should touch on that. Yeah, and he acknowledges in his interview in defense of Jerry Krause that was the right move. But at the time, he was pissed off about it because that was his enforcer, defender on the court and his best friend off the court on the team. So that's the kind of notes that he was giving at that point. And then everybody from for 8, 9, and 10. I just watched today the almost finished version of 10 and gave my own notes to the final audio mix and color correction. And then in a couple of days, so we're still not done with the series yet, but we will be, or we better be in about a week or else they're going to rip up my contract.
Michael Jordan returned to basketball and did get eliminated. That's one of the things that kind of goes under the radar.
Good point, Jay.
Against Horace Grant, one of those people, unlike B.J. Armstrong, that was able to close the deal. So why was losing to Shaq, Penny, Nick Anderson stole the ball from him? Why was that so important to the three-peat that ultimately took place?
That's a great question, and it reminded me of something too. That's another note that he gave because Me, I'm the director. I know it all. I'm going to tell the story I want to tell. I've studied this whole thing. I said, I made the decision on the rough cut. Horace Grant wasn't that big a deal. Michael wasn't ready to come back. He was rusty. We can't spend a lot of time on Horace Grant because we got story to move on to. Michael said, no, I was pissed. That is what drove me that offseason to lose to the Magic and to lose to Horace Grant like that. So, and my editors, they were right. Like the Abai Sofsky is one of our editors. He's brilliant. And Chad Beck is our lead editor. Brilliant. They put that in. And I on purpose I hired non-sports guys for this because I wanted them just to keep on the story. And they said that's an interesting story to them. So this is a good example of how it's a collaborative effort. I'm not always right with these things. So I said, we'll keep it out. Michael said, put it back in. They said, see, Jason, we were right too. We're on Michael's team with this. We put that in. Tim Grover, who is one of the MVP interviews of this thing, his batting average and his sound bites was like through the roof. His interview was
they were
captivating. Yep. He tells that story and he gets choked up at saying, like, normally guys would take a month off, and Michael saying, I'll see you tomorrow. That's Correct. How fired up he was. So you can make a good argument. He was rusty. He knew it. He came back as number 45. And when Nick Anderson said 45 ain't 23, that lit a fire. And you saw what he did. You got a glimpse of it.
Changed this number.
You got a glimpse of it when he came back to 23. He couldn't sustain it for the entire series. The Bulls couldn't sustain it. Honestly, that team was in a bit of disarray. This is pre-Rodman, remember. Rodman was maybe the most important X factor in that second three-peat. So he goes into that summer, and he's got Space Jam to do. But he needs to get himself back into shape, into playing shape. And he knows, as we've discovered in episodes 5 and 6, that his game did his talking. There's no movies, there's no McDonald's, there's no Hanes, there's no Gatorade, there's no Nike without his game on the floor. So he said, I got to get back in and get back to who MJ is.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.